Just very briefly, Aerotropolis is a word that a consultant, John Casarda, coined to describe a city that has an economy that's really focused around an airport. So with a lot of the increase in international trade and globalization, there are some cities that have airports that are large and bustling. So think about all of those boxes that we send through FedEx and Amazon. That a lot of that is transported through air cargo. Now, the Aerotropolis proposal here in Missouri is a little bit different. For the past 2 or 3 years, state and city officials have been talking to Chinese representatives about increasing international trade at the Lambert Airport. So far, so good. But then, in this spring, there was an attorney who had been meeting with Chinese representatives, effectively came back from a trip to China. There have been a number of those junkets, a number of the elected officials go on to China, and said, I know what they want warehouses. So, if you think about it, there have been these talks for 2 or 3 years, and suddenly we're talking about subsidizing the construction of warehouses. The Aerotropolis legislation would create $360 million in tax credits. Tax credits, despite what some say, are not free money. They come from somewhere. A tax credit, I'll just briefly explain it. It's if I were to receive a $1 million tax credit from the state, that could reduce my tax burden by $1 for dollar by $1 million. So if my tax bill was $2 million, suddenly it become $1 million. And because you can sell them and transfer them, it means that if I, little me, with my tiny tax burden, were to receive $1 million tax credit, I could sell it to someone else, so effectively I get cash for that. Now, tax credits also are basically, they come out of the state revenue before the state gets to spend it. So it's kind of like, instead of me using my debit card or cash to make a purchase, when I make a purchase, I tell the person, don't worry, you get a fraction of my paycheck in 3 months or 5 months. And the question is always what happens if I get a pay cut or if I lose my job. That's kind of how tax credits work. So the Aerotropolis tax credits, again, are $360 million. $60 million would go to subsidizing people who send planes from St. Louis to international destinations, so to encourage the trade of Missouri-produced or United States-produced goods to some other country. But $300 million of those tax credits would go to subsidize warehouse construction. And now it has to be new warehouse construction. What proponents say is that we need these warehouses to hold the goods that we get from China or other countries. Now, in reality, there currently is about 18 million square feet in vacant warehouse space just in the St. Louis area. It wasn't too hard to figure that out. All we did was look at market research for the last quarter, and suddenly that 18 million square feet in available warehouse space, I'm talking about developed, available, if you want to lease it, it's ready, didn't quite fit with the proponent statements that we need warehouse space.
Wasn't there a very, very huge building complex right at the airport that was the McDonnell Douglas plant that would be an ideal place for warehousing for this deal, which also has facilities for trucks to come in and out if they're going to utilize that part of it?
Well, I'm not going to dispute that. I will say I'm not an airport planner, so that may in fact be the case. We did speak with both Michael Weber, who is an air cargo consultant. He's worked with Chicago and Kansas City, as well as R.W. Mann, who is another air cargo consultant. And what both of them have said is that even given the projected increase in flights that proponents say, they believe that the existing facilities that are in use could easily take care of that. They say a much smaller square footage requirement than what proponents say. But absolutely, I mean, you could point to so many cases. We drove, just driving around the airport, I mean, there are space available signs all over. One of the things that we found in the course of that research was a review by St. Louis County officials of the possible beneficiaries of these tax credits. And what St. Louis County's review identified were, I think, about 5 areas right around the airport that are owned by large landholders or the airport itself. And one of the things that I think more viscerally bothered me as someone who cares about efficient government spending and generally small government was that the county had shown that those 5 areas had already been authorized to receive up to about $100 million in existing tax incentives, and were eligible to receive under existing state programs, other tax credit programs, other tax increment financing, things like that, were eligible to receive almost another $200 million. So one of the things that this is starting to look like to me is that the very companies and people who could receive these Aerotropolis tax credits are already the beneficiary or will soon receive hundreds of millions of dollars in other tax credits. So the other thing I want to talk about is the political aspect of this. Now, when you're talking about $300 million, it's a lot of money, and if one person or a few people can control that, I think that would create quite a bit of political power. In the Aerotropolis legislation, there's a statement that says in order to get the warehouse construction tax credits, you have to be declared to be in what is called a gateway zone, which, while that sounds very boring, the only way that you can be designated as a gateway zone is if the mayor of a city not within a county, aka St. Louis, or a county executive, that's the only way you can do it. Is if one of those two types of people designate your area as a gateway zone. I mean, to me, that is incredible. Again, setting aside the fact that the questions of do we need warehouse space in general, is this project a good idea, can Lambert even handle this increased international traffic? Setting aside all of that, why on earth is it a good idea for the state to effectively give these people the gateway power to $300 million? I think regardless of what your ideological stance is, if you're interested in just good government in general, that makes very little sense. And in the course of our research, when we were part of what we did, and you can read these all online, is we requested emails from the Midwest China Hub Commission, which is the group of political authorities who are behind this. And we looked through them to just make sure that we weren't missing something. And one of the things that was in there was a statement from the mayor's chief of staff, Jeff Rainford, saying that the city has decided that it wants this regardless of the involvement of China. Which, you hear that and it's like, okay, is this about China or is this about subsidizing warehouses around the airport? And again, why is this about subsidizing warehouses since we have so many already? So all of that, by the way, is posted online at showmeinstitute.org. So you're more than welcome to go ahead and read those emails and the documents we received and make your own conclusions if you're especially interested in that. The last thing I want to talk about just in general is accountability. One of the problems that we have with, I think, politicians, again, across the line, across all ideologies, is this propensity to issue press releases claiming incredible jobs numbers. And there's really no accountability because you issue that press release before those jobs were created or were not created. You use these estimates and you say, 18,000 jobs, 5,000 jobs, 100 jobs. An organization like the Show Me Institute out of Michigan, the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, they did something that we're hoping to replicate, which was over a 10-year period, they evaluated the claims made on press releases by government officials against actual outcomes. And what they found is of 127 different tax credit projects, only 10 delivered on promises within the time frame promised. So whenever I see these numbers, on the one hand, someone always says, well, you're against jobs, you're against 18,000 people having a job. Well, no. I question the estimates behind that, given the poor track record of those estimates and given how frequently those estimates don't bear out. And so this is really, this is on a higher level, this is a major problem because you issue the press release, you get the political goodwill, you get okay, so-and-so created X number of jobs, but 10, 15 years down the road, there's no follow-up. There's no press release about the fact that those jobs didn't occur.
Well,
the first part of that question, the tax credit question, I think, with a lot of government programs, like tax credits and like tips, it's kind of this weird rhetorical situation where you have to say that China is so interested, but only if they get tax credits. Otherwise, there's no rationale for the tax credits. But at the same time, you know, if China isn't interested but for the tax credits, you know, then clearly this isn't really a good idea. You know, it's a very weird situation. For this in particular, that's one of the things that the Show Me Institute has called for is show us where a Chinese representative or a Chinese company is saying, we need these tax credits before we'll come. Because these negotiations have been going on for years. You know, and it wasn't until this spring that the tax credits were brought up. So if they're interested anyway, then no tax credits are needed, then okay, let's go. You know, like let's not spend the state